Korean Mafia boss ruled the underworld with blood until a single DNA test became his only weakness. The call came at 2047 in the morning, and it ended 12 years of certainty. Kwon Min-soo was standing at the window of his Seoul penthouse, 40 stories above a city that whispered his name in fear, when his private line rang. Not the encrypted business channel. Not the line his lieutenants used when blood needed cleaning up. His private line. The number etched into the memory of fewer than 6 people alive. The area code that appeared on his screen was American. Atlanta. He answered on the second ring, Mr. Kwon Min-soo. A woman's voice. Measured. Clinical. The kind of voice that delivered bad news for a living and had stopped apologizing for it. This is Dr. Park Hyuna calling from Emory University Hospital, Atlanta, Georgia. I'm reaching out on behalf of one of our patients, a Mrs. Adaeze Kwon. The name moved through him like a blade pulled slow. Adaeze... There must be some mistake, he said. His voice was perfectly level. It always was. She is my ex-wife. We finalized our divorce 8 months ago. I understand, sir. But the patient specifically requested you be contacted about her condition and about the child. The room didn't tilt. Kwon Min-soo did not allow rooms to tilt. But something shifted, deep, tectonic, in a place no rival had ever reached. What child? Your son, Mr. Kwon. He was born 5 months ago. His name on the birth certificate is Kwon Jae-hyun. Before we follow Min-soo onto that plane, because yes, he's already booking it before this call ends, I need you to understand exactly what kind of man is about to walk into that hospital. What he built, what he destroyed, and what one 5-month-old boy is going to cost him. Subscribe if you're staying, because this story doesn't get easier from here. It gets real. Let's begin. Min-soo stood at the window long after the call ended. The Seoul skyline glittered 40 floors below him. His city, his empire, the thing he had assembled over 12 years of blood and discipline and absolute refusal to be surprised. He had dismantled organizations. He had turned testimony into silence. He had built a machine so precise that nothing breathed near him without his knowledge. And somewhere in Atlanta, a boy with his name on a birth certificate had been alive for 5 months. He did the arithmetic before the doctor had finished speaking. 8 months since the divorce was signed, 5 months since the birth. Which meant that when Adaeze sat across from him in that Atlanta attorney's office, composed, unhurried, her signature clean and unshaking on every page, she had already been carrying his child for 3 months. She had known. She had looked at him and said nothing. She had walked out of that building and built a life that excluded him entirely. Min-soo pressed his intercom. Get me a private flight to Atlanta. Wheels up within the hour. His lieutenant's voice came back cautious, careful. Security detail, sir? No. Sir? I said no. Alone. He released the intercom and stood in the silence of the most powerful room he owned. And for the first time in 12 years, the silence offered him nothing. He had built a file on Adaeze the morning after the divorce was finalized. Standard procedure for anyone who had been close enough to know things. The file had told him what he already suspected. She was not a threat. She had moved to a quiet neighborhood in Atlanta's West End. She worked as a corporate attorney for a boutique firm that specialized in international compliance. Her financials were clean, no debt, no irregularities, no contact with anyone from his world. She had kept his name legally, used her maiden name professionally, and proceeded with her life as though the marriage had been a door she had simply closed behind her. Deliberately. That was the word that had stayed with him. Adaeze Okafor did nothing by accident. She had been 3 months pregnant at the signing table. Deliberate. She had built a new life in Atlanta with his child inside her. Deliberate. She had named the boy Kwon Jae-hyun, given him his father's name, and still said nothing for 5 months. Deliberate. Min-soo was a man who respected strategy. He had never once expected to be outmaneuvered by the woman he had let go. He had made one critical error in that attorney's office 8 months ago. He had looked at Adaeze's composed face, her dry eyes, her steady hand, and he had read stillness as absence. He had assumed that because she showed him nothing, she felt nothing. That the woman across the table had already moved on, already decided, already closed the door on her side as cleanly as he had on his. He had been wrong. And now he was going to Atlanta to look her in the eyes. Those dark, precise eyes that had always seen through him, and answer for every door he had closed. Min-soo picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. On the glass desk behind him, a file lay open. Quarterly projections, 3 pending deals, a meeting that 20 men had flown in from Tokyo to attend. He left it untouched. In 12 years, Kwon Min-soo had never walked into an unknown room unprepared. Tonight, he had no choice. And somewhere underneath the cold weight of his composure, underneath the 12 years of armor he had never once let down, something stirred. Something that felt less like dread and more like the faintest, most dangerous thing he had ever allowed himself. Hope. He had ruled with blood. He had never once bled. Until now. Chapter 2. The empire he built over her absence. The private jet cut through the dark at 30,000 feet, and Kwon Min-soo sat in the kind of silence that had nothing to do with quiet. The cabin was immaculate. Cream leather, dim lighting, a glass of scotch on the armrest that he hadn't touched. His phone sat face up on the table between his hands. 49 unread messages from Seoul, 3 from Baek Tae-young, 1 marked urgent in red. He read none of them. For the first time in 12 years, Seoul could burn without him. He was thinking about Atlanta. About 3 years ago. About a boardroom on the 14th floor of a glass tower on Peachtree Street, where a woman had looked at him across a conference table and made him feel, for the first time in a decade, like someone was actually seeing him. Her name had been Adaeze Okafor. She had walked into that compliance meeting 20 minutes late, not flustered, not apologetic, just unhurried, the way people move when they've decided the world will wait for them. She was tall, brown-skinned, her natural hair pulled back in a way that looked both deliberate and effortless. She wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made for her and carried a single leather folio instead of the stacked documents every other attorney in the room had brought. She sat down across from Min-soo, opened the folio, glanced at him once, and then said to the room, "Before we discuss terms, can someone tell me what this deal is actually trying to accomplish? Not financially, actually." The room had gone quiet. Min-soo had looked at her for a long moment. He hadn't had an answer. It was the first time in 10 years he hadn't. He had courted her the way he did everything, with patience, with precision, with the understanding that things worth having required more than money and pressure. He had taken her to dinner 3 times before she agreed to a 4th. He had told her more truth in those early months than he had told any living person in his adult life. Careful truths, edited truths, but truths nonetheless. She had received each one with the same stillness, the same dark eyes that held their judgment until they were ready to deliver it. 11 months after that boardroom, they were married. Private ceremony, no announcement. He had told himself it was protection, that keeping her separate from his world was the most loving thing he could do. He had believed that. Completely. For 2 years he had believed it. She had asked about his work. He had redirected. She had reached for closeness. Not demanding, not dramatic, just the consistent, quiet reaching of a woman who believed the person she loved had more to offer than what she was being given. He had managed her. That was the honest word for it. He had managed her the way he managed everything, with control dressed as care, with distance presented as protection. She had stayed for 2 years, not because she was weak, because she was the kind of woman who believed people were worth the effort of being understood. She had given him every opportunity to let her in. He had not taken a single one. The morning she left, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She stood in the kitchen of their Seoul penthouse, her ring on the counter, her coat already on, and she said, "I can't love a ghost, Min-soo. And that's all you've ever let me know." He had signed the divorce papers 8 months ago without hesitation. He had told himself it was clean, controlled, the right outcome for both of them. 30,000 feet above the Pacific, he finally admitted what he had known since the moment the doctor said his son's name. He had confused control with care for so long that he had lost the ability to tell them apart. He had built 2 new territories in the 8 months since she left, eliminated 3 rivals, accepted a public business award that his legitimate enterprises had earned legitimately. His empire had never been more powerful. He had never been more empty. The scotch sat untouched. Below him, the ocean was invisible in the dark. He thought about a woman with a folio and no apology for being late, who had asked the only question that had ever mattered, and wondered for the first time what answer he might finally be ready to give. Chapter 3. Atlanta. The room where everything changed, Emory University Hospital, smelled like antiseptic and fluorescent light, and the particular quiet of a building where the stakes were always high and nobody pretended otherwise. Min-soo walked through it in a dark suit with no entourage, no weapon, no strategy. The linoleum clicked beneath his shoes. A nurse led him down a corridor without small talk, which he appreciated, and stopped at a door on the 3rd floor and left him to it. He stood outside for 3 seconds. In 12 years, he had never stood outside a room for 3 seconds. He pushed the door open. Adaeze was sitting up in the bed, an IV line running from her left arm, a medical chart on the side table she had clearly already read. She was thinner than he remembered. The softness of the life they'd shared had been replaced by something leaner, more defined, the way a person looks when they've been carrying a weight for a long time. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, dark and natural, falling past her collarbone. She wore no jewelry. She didn't need it. Her eyes found him the moment the door opened. Dark eyes. Precise. The same eyes that had looked at him across a boardroom 3 years ago and seen through every layer of performance he had constructed. They gave nothing away now. No shock, no warmth, no fear. Just the weight of a woman who'd been expecting him and had prepared accordingly. "You came," she said. "You didn't tell me." The air between them carried the temperature of everything that had been said and unsaid, between 2 people who had once shared a bed and now shared a silence that had lasted 8 months and apparently contained a child. She didn't look away. "No, I didn't." "He's 5 months old." "Yes. You were 3 months pregnant when we signed those papers." "Yes." Something moved in Min-soo's chest. Not quite anger, not quite grief. Something older and less comfortable than either. "And you said nothing." Adaeze set down the tablet she had been holding. Her hands were steady. Everything about her was steady, and that steadiness was more devastating than any rage could have been. "I watched you sign our divorce papers, Min-soo. You didn't hesitate, not once. You sat across that table and you closed our marriage like it was a contract you'd reviewed and found unfavorable." Her voice was even. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later. And I thought, if he can end 8 years of knowing me without flinching, what does a child mean to him? Another variable. Another person to manage from a careful distance." She looked at him directly. "I refuse to let my son be managed. He is my son. He is." She didn't soften it or sharpen it, just let the facts sit between them, solid as stone. "And he has been for 5 months without you. He's been fed and held and sung to and loved without you. So before you tell me what rights you have, I need you to understand what absence means." The room went very still. Min-soo had no answer that wasn't also a confession. Then Adaeze reached toward the bassinet beside the bed. She lifted the boy slowly, the way mothers do, like the motion was unconscious, like her body had learned this before her mind caught up. She held him against her chest for a moment, her lips pressing briefly to his forehead, and then she looked at Min-soo with the deliberateness of a woman making a decision she understood was irreversible. She placed the boy in his arms. Kwon Jae-hyun was 5 months old and asleep. His face was round, soft at the edges, with Adaeze's nose and her mouth, and the particular crease between his brows that Min-soo recognized with a shock that moved through him like current. Because he had seen that crease every morning in his own mirror for 36 years. The boy's fingers were curled against his sternum, small, impossibly, terrifyingly small for something that was already rearranging every priority Min-soo had held for a decade. No DNA test was needed. He knew. The way you know a wound is yours. Not because someone tells you, but because you feel exactly where it belongs. Something fractured in him. Quietly. Completely. 12 years of reinforced walls dismantled in the space of 10 seconds by a sleeping child who weighed less than the files on his desk. "I'm not here to reclaim what we had," he said. His voice was low, rougher than intended. "I'm not asking for anything you don't choose to give, but Adaeze." He looked up and found her watching him with that expression, not forgiveness, not warmth, but something that preceded both. Something that meant she was still deciding. "I will not be a stranger to him. Whatever I have to change, whatever it costs." The silence stretched. "Sit down, Min-soo," she said quietly. He sat. No strategy, no leverage, no exit. Just the weight of his son in his arms and the woman who had carried that weight alone for 5 months, watching him from 3 feet away, deciding whether he was finally worth believing. Chapter 4. Rules of engagement. He didn't sleep. Min-soo sat in a hotel room 3 blocks from the hospital and watched the Atlanta skyline do its pale gray version of dawn. His phone still showing 47 unread messages from Seoul. His jacket across the back of a chair, his mind somewhere it had never been before. By 8 a.m., Adaeze had texted him a single line, "Come at 10. Bring nothing." He came at 10. He brought nothing. She was dressed when he arrived. Dark jeans, a fitted cream blouse, her hair pinned back. She moved through the small hospital room with quiet authority, Jae-hyun in a bouncer seat near the window, morning light falling soft across his face. Her older sister Kiyamaka was already there, sitting in the corner chair with her arms folded and the expression of a woman who had prepared remarks. Kiyamaka was sharp-featured, dark-skinned, with natural haircut close and eyes that had been suspicious of him before he even opened the door. She looked at Min-soo the way prosecutors look at defendants they've already decided are guilty and are simply waiting on the paperwork. "Let's be clear about what this meeting is," Adaeze said, before he could speak. She didn't sit. She stood near the window with Jae-hyun at her feet, and she delivered her terms the way she must have delivered closing arguments. Measured, precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Supervised visits. Neutral locations. Consistent schedule. Same day, same time. No security detail near Jae-hyun. Not one. If he missed 2 visits without documented emergency cause, the arrangement ended. No negotiation. He listened without interrupting. "You agree to these terms," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." Kiyamaka made a sound in the corner. Not quite a laugh. "Men like you don't change," she said flatly. "Not the ones who built what you built. I've seen enough of your kind to know the difference between someone turning over a new leaf and someone performing one." She leaned forward. "Prove me wrong." Min-soo held her gaze. "I intend to. Intentions are cheap. I know." He looked at Adaeze. "That's why I said I intend to. Not that I already have." Something shifted in Adaze's expression, barely visible, quickly controlled, but he saw it. He had always been very good at reading rooms. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He silenced it without looking. An hour later, Big Tae-young appeared in the hotel lobby, uninvited, grim-faced, carrying the particular energy of a man delivering news he didn't want to deliver. "The Jeong Syndicate has been tracking your absence," Baek said quietly. 72 hours, no contact. "There are conversations happening, sir. The kind that happen when people think the top of the structure has gone soft. Let them talk." "Sir?" Handle it remotely. I'm not leaving Atlanta. Min-soo adjusted his cufflink. You've never stayed anywhere for a woman before, Baek said carefully. She's not a woman, Min-soo said. She's the mother of my son. That's different. Baek looked at him for a long moment and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. The first visit happened the following Saturday. A park 3 blocks from Adaeze's apartment. Green, ordinary, full of families who had no idea what kind of man was sitting on the grass in a tailored suit, trying to figure out how to hold a 5-month-old without looking like a man who had never held anything that couldn't defend itself. Adaeze sat on a bench 15 feet away, close enough to intervene, far enough to give him room to fail privately. Jae-hyun stared up at him from his lap with a particular fearless assessment of an infant who had not yet learned what the world wanted him to be afraid of. He made a small sound, not a word, not quite a laugh, somewhere between the two. Min-soo looked up. Adaeze was watching, her expression unreadable. When the hour ended, she collected Jae-hyun with the practiced ease of a woman who had been doing this alone for 5 months. Same time next week? She asked without looking at him. Yes, he said. No hesitation. Walking back to his car, Baek fell into step beside him. Well? Min-soo didn't answer. He was already calculating which Seoul meetings to reschedule for next Saturday. Chapter 5. The Fracture Lines. 3 months passed. Min-soo missed 0 visits. He rescheduled international deals, sent lieutenants into rooms he had never previously delegated, declined a contract that would have required him to be in Tokyo on a Saturday. His second-in-command noticed. His mother noticed. His rivals noticed. He didn't care. He had learned in those 3 months which particular song stopped Jae-hyun mid-cry, a low rhythmic hum that Min-soo had discovered entirely by accident at 2 in the morning when Adaeze had handed him the boy and gone to find formula. He had learned that Jae-hyun laughed hardest when Min-soo made a face he would never make in front of any living soul in Seoul. He had learned that watching his son sleep had the particular quality of silence that was not empty but full, dense, with something he had no name for yet. Adaeze still watched from the bench, but she had moved 2 feet closer. Then came the photograph. Min-soo was in his rented Atlanta apartment, reviewing documents, when Baek called with the careful tone of a man delivering information to someone dangerous. A surveillance image had circulated through Underworld channels overnight. Min-soo at the park, 3 weeks prior, Jae-hyun on his hip, both of them caught mid-laugh, the unguarded, unstaged laugh of a man who had forgotten, for one unguarded second, who he was supposed to be. The Jeong Syndicate had been watching, and in Min-soo's world, that image meant exactly one thing. Kwon Min-soo had a vulnerability. His first instinct was surgical. Find the source, bury the image, remove the problem with the permanent deficiency that had kept him in power for 12 years. The instinct lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then Jae-hyun's face appeared in his mind. Round, fearless, utterly dependent on the decisions Min-soo made in the next 24 hours. Double security on Adaeze's building, he said. Quietly. She doesn't know unless it becomes necessary. He went to her apartment that night. She opened the door in a loose gray shirt, her hair down, the warm smell of something cooked drifting from behind her. She looked at his face, and whatever she had been about to say dissolved. What happened? Not a question. He told her everything. The photograph. The syndicate. Every word of it. Adaeze listened without moving. Her arms came slowly across her chest. Not defensiveness, more like she was holding something inside herself steady. When he finished, the silence that followed had weight. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said. I know. Your world touching ours. Jae-hyun becoming a target because of who you are. He was never in real danger. I made certain before I came here. This time. Her eyes were dark and direct and devastatingly calm. What about next time? What about when he's old enough to understand what that photograph means? Min-soo held her gaze. You deserve to know every threat the moment I know it. That's a promise. Not a gesture. She looked at him for a long time. You told me immediately, she said, almost to herself. I promised I would. Something moved through her expression, surprise that she hadn't expected, and underneath it, something more complex and more dangerous. He recognized it, because he had been watching her face for 3 months, and he had learned to read the things she controlled too well to show. She was reconsidering him. 2 weeks later, he arrived at his apartment to find Kiyamaka waiting on his doorstep, with the energy of a woman who had been building up to this conversation for some time. I've been watching you, Kiyamaka said, before he could speak. 3 months, not one missed Saturday. You told her the truth about the photograph immediately. She tilted her head. I still don't trust you. But I am adjusting my timeline. For what? For everything I promised Adaeze I would do to you if you hurt her again? A pause. How long is the new timeline? Depends entirely on what you do next. Min-soo, then I'll give you nothing to act on. Brief silence. Good answer. The evening that changed everything came on an ordinary Thursday. Adaeze was running late. He had Yoon at his apartment, the first time she had allowed it, an extension of trust earned over 3 months of consistency. When she arrived, she pushed the door open quietly, expecting to collect and leave. She stopped in the doorway. Min-soo was on the couch, upright, Jae-hyun asleep on his chest, a Korean children's book open across his knee. His head was tilted slightly back. His face, the face that Seoul knew as cold, calculating, architecturally controlled, was at rest, unguarded. Soft in a way she had never seen in 2 years of marriage. She stood there for a long time. She did not wake them. When Min-soo stirred and found her watching, he didn't deflect or explain. He simply lifted Jae-hyun with one careful hand, carried him to the portable crib, and returned. He fell asleep during the tiger story, he said. He always does, she said. The kitchen was small. They stood in it together for the first time without the structure of schedules and terms and distance between them. Outside, Atlanta moved through its evening. Inside, the walls between them were thinner than either of them had prepared for. She had come to collect her son. She left having left something of herself behind, something she hadn't budgeted for, hadn't planned, and could not take back. Chapter 6: Blood and Consequences. You ride without violence. That was always how the most dangerous men operated. He was 61 years old, silver-haired, politically connected across 3 governments, and he sat across from Min-soo in a private room in Seoul with the particular ease of a man who had been threatening people for so long he no longer needed to raise his voice to do it. You've been making interesting adjustments, Kwon, Jeong said, pouring tea as though they were colleagues at a routine meeting. Cutting partnerships, restructuring territories, blocking your Saturdays. He smiled pleasantly. It reads like distraction. It reads like evolution, Min-soo said. Perhaps. Jeong set down the teapot. Or perhaps it reads like a man who has developed complications he didn't anticipate. A pause, deliberate and precise. Family complications specifically, the kind that make men unpredictable, the kind that, in the wrong conversation, in the wrong circles, could become very uncomfortable for everyone involved. It was blackmail dressed in courtesy. Min-soo had heard it 100 times in 100 forms. His terms were clean: surrender 2 American territories and 1 Seoul contract, and Jeong would keep what he knew about the child and the mother entirely private. Min-soo looked at him across the table. Jae-hyun's face appeared in his mind before any tactical calculation did. Not as a liability, as a reason. I need to make a call, Min-soo said, and excused himself. In the corridor, he called Baek. Find everything Jeong has buried, he said quietly. Every falsified record, every bribed official, every transaction that shouldn't exist. I want it documented, verified, and in attorney's hands within 18 hours. Beck's pause was brief. You're going legal. I'm going permanent. The 18 hours that followed were the most methodical Min-soo had been since he built his empire. Except this time he was building a case instead of a criminal enterprise. Financial forensics. 3 jurisdictions. 17 documented violations, each one clean, each one prosecutable, each one delivered to the appropriate authorities with the efficiency of a man who had spent a decade learning exactly which doors to knock on. When Jeong's 24-hour window expired, Min-soo called him. The territories are yours, he said. Take them. A beat. But if my family's name appears in any conversation you have from this moment forward, what is currently happening to you will feel like the beginning of something much longer. You've gone soft, Kwon. No, Min-soo said. And then Soo said, I've gotten smarter. There's a difference. He went to Adaeze's apartment that evening and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, seated at her kitchen table in a dark wrap dress, her hair loose, a mug of tea cooling in her hands. When he finished, she set the mug down. You handled it legally. Yes. You didn't. She stopped, chose the words carefully. You didn't make anyone disappear. No. The silence that followed was different from every silence they had shared before. Not the silence of withheld information or managed distance. Something else. Something that breathed. The man I divorced would have handled that differently, she said. The man you divorced wasn't trying to be someone's father. She looked at him, really looked. The way she had crossed that boardroom table 3 years ago, when she had been deciding whether what was underneath was worth her time. Jae-hyun woke at midnight unsettled and restless. They went to him together without discussion, standing side by side over the crib in the dark, watching their son work through whatever small disturbance had pulled him from sleep. Min-soo placed one hand on the boy's chest, steady, warm, and Jae-hyun settled almost immediately, as though the weight of his father's hand was sufficient reason to stop fighting. You should go, Adaeze said. Her voice was low. She hadn't moved. I know, Min-soo said. He hadn't moved either. Their shoulders were almost touching. The city hummed below the window. Neither of them stepped away. When he finally left, she closed the door and stood with her back against it in the dark for a very long time. Something had shifted between them. Irreversibly. And they both knew it. And neither of them said it out loud because some shifts are too significant to name too soon. Chapter 7. What was always true. 6 months in, Min-soo had split himself between 2 cities, and neither of them felt like home anymore, which meant he was beginning to understand that home had become a person rather than a place. His empire was running, cleaner than it had ever been. Several of the gray market partnerships he had maintained for years were dissolved. 3 legitimate businesses had expanded to fill the space. His name still carried weight in Seoul's underworld. But the weight was changing shape, quietly, the way things change when someone stops needing them to be what they were. His mother had called 3 weeks prior. She had heard rumors, the way she always heard things, through a network of social connections that rivaled any intelligence operation he had ever run. He told her everything. Adaeze, Jae-hyun, Atlanta, the divorce, the silence, the 5 months he hadn't known, all of it. She had been quiet for a long time. Bring him to Seoul, she had finally said. When it's time, bring them both. It was the closest thing to an apology his mother had ever offered for the years she had told him that vulnerability was the luxury of people who could afford to lose. Adaeze's mother, Ngozi, arrived from Lagos in the 6th month. She was tall, regal, with close-cropped silver hair, and the quiet authority of a woman who had decided decades ago that the world would come to her rather than the other way around. Adaeze organized a dinner, Min-soo, herself, Hiyamaka, and Nuzi, in a restaurant in Buckhead where the lighting was low and the tables were private. Noji asked her questions the way surgeons make incisions, precise, targeted, revealing exactly what she needed to see. Why did you let her go? Because I was a coward who called it protection. What have you actually changed? How I work, who I work with, what I'm willing to sacrifice for the people who matter. And when your world pulls you back, it already tried. I handled it without bringing it to their door. That will always be my first priority. Ngozi studied him across the table with eyes that were Adaeze's eyes in an older face. Dark, precise, refusing to be performed for. At the end of the evening, she said something to Adaeze in Igbo. Kiyamaka translated, leaning close to Min-soo's ear. She says you're still dangerous, but you know it. That's the only kind of dangerous that can be trusted. He walked Adaeze to her door afterward. The Atlanta night was warm, faintly humid, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't arrived yet. The city glowed around them. She stood at her doorway in a deep burgundy dress, her earrings catching the light, gold, intricate, the kind her mother had brought from home. My mother approved of you, she said, in her way. And you? She looked at him. The look lasted longer than it needed to, and they both knew it. I'm getting there. Tell me when you arrive. She almost smiled. Almost. And then she closed the door, and Min-soo stood on her steps for a moment in the warm southern dark, understanding that almost was the most dangerous word she had ever said to him. 2 weeks later, on an ordinary evening, Jae-hyun asleep, dinner cleared, the apartment holding the comfortable quiet of a space two people had been slowly, carefully learning to share. Min-soo said it. Without planning to. Without strategy. Without any of the calculated precision he had used to navigate every important conversation of his adult life. I'm in love with you. The room went absolutely still. I don't know if I ever stopped, he continued, his voice low, the words arriving without armor. But I know it's true right now, and I've spent my entire life saying nothing that mattered. I won't do that anymore. Adaeze stood very still across the kitchen. Her hands were flat on the counter. Her eyes, those dark, precise, unhurried eyes, were on his face with an intensity that felt like pressure and warmth simultaneously. She didn't say it back. Not yet. Go home, Min-soo, she said softly. Let me think. He left, and for the first time in 12 years, in perhaps his entire life, Kwon Min-soo walked out of a room with nothing decided, nothing controlled, nothing guaranteed. He had said the truest thing he knew, and now he had to wait for someone else's answer. The silence on the drive back to his hotel was the loudest thing he had ever heard. For 12 years, silence had been Kwon Min-soo's greatest weapon. He'd built an empire on calculated risks and guaranteed outcomes. But as he walked out of that apartment into the warm Atlanta night, he had nothing. No strategy. No exit plan. Just the truth of what he'd finally dared to say. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever done. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the exposure of standing without his armor, it felt more like strength than anything he had ever called by that name. Min-soo finally laid his heart on the line, but some shifts are too significant to name too soon. Do you think Adaeze should give him a second chance, or are some doors better left closed? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Like and subscribe so you won't miss the next one. See you next video.